Hello everybody, my name is Ian Kirkpattykake. I'm an author and robot, and today we're going to be doing something that I haven't done in a while, and that is a response video. I guess it hasn't been that long. It was back with Silver Shamrock that I did a response video, but in this case we are doing a response video to the one, the only, the cyborg queen, Jenna Moreci, because she, as I'm recording this, just released a 10 problematic tropes in fiction video, and well, I only saw the first two and was like, well, I have some things to say, so I figured let's have some fun with that. But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do on this channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below for Lamoy and Fresh Meat Feature. And number three, if you would like to check out my books and mark down the number of toxic tropes that you can find in them, you can get them at any of your favorite book retailers or ask at your local library. And I will look forward to your reporting back in the comments below how many toxic tropes I have committed. I'm sure that I've committed more than there is evidence of just yet, but just you wait. Just you wait. Now, one of the reasons that I like doing these sorts of videos specifically, or responding to writing critique, is the same reason that I started a channel, and that is because there's so much information that's one-sided, and then it's treated like it's the law, that this is what you have to do and this is the way that it must be, that I actually, maybe it's just contrarian of me, but I like to express that there are different ways to think about things and to create things and to kind of bring back levity to writing, because I think some people take writing advice, or giving it or receiving it, a little too seriously, to the point that it becomes destructive, or you think too hard about what's going to get you in trouble before anybody is even really reading your work, and that can be destructive to the creative process. I think it becomes much too political when you start thinking about this stuff, when you should just be writing your characters or your stories or whatever. Two, I think it then just sets up a way for us to have conversations, and we may disagree, and we're all going to write our different stories from our different perspectives with our different experiences, and that's totally fine, because that is what art in general is all about, is you showing you the expressions of what you see and the universes that you've created and the characters that you have and the experiences you have, and me doing it my way. And we're never going to match because, well, we're not the Borg. So I just wanted to respond to this specifically because, well, I'm kind of a transgressive writer myself, as if my Jeffrey Dahmer-inspired fiction isn't proof enough of that. But also just to give an alternative perspective from what is probably, Jenna's going to probably be the mainstream or common perspective that you will find in writing communities, because they want to be more careful and more hesitant, and it's just a very specific type of thing. So we're going to give some alternate perspectives on how to tackle some of these things, if they're actually that problematic, or really is it personal taste. I'm going to spoiler alert, it's probably all personal taste, and there's probably situations where all of this stuff works. It's just not what she likes, but we'll see, because I only know the first two, and I had some information or some thoughts about those. So let's go ahead and get started. And before anything else, well, you can know that I am completely as fair as humanly possible on this, because I enjoyed Eve. I did not enjoy the Savior's Champion, so take that as you will. Speaking of Eve, where did Eve go? Eve used to be in the background. Where is Eve? Stop hiding her. Freaking Percy is like, give me the duck daddy with his tight black jeans. He's obviously going to be wearing like a jean jacket or a leather jacket with his sunglasses and swooped up hair, and just, guys, why is she hiding the best character she's ever created from all of us? Somebody needs to help her.
Hello, everybody. I am breaking down the 10 worst problematic tropes in fiction.
That's all that I'll say.
Fiction isn't designed to be delicate. We write about death, bloodshed, heartbreak, and suffering.
True facts.
Stories are here to explore the darkest sides of humanity. That's what makes them intense.
I will say, that's what I think is the most hilarious thing ever, is that people will not have problems with murderers, but they'll have problems with other things. Like if you look at Dead End Drive, Alex is a murderer. He's kind of a heartless murderer. He lit buildings on fire that his classmates lived in because they dumped his salon kit in the toilet. But people have more of a problem with him cutting a black woman's hair than actually murdering people. Oh, and recently, freaking with talking about the Wasp Factory, if you go into the comments there, the comments are less critical of Frank being a murderer than they are of Frank being a misogynist. It is mind-boggling.
And gripping. But we can do this without being directly harmful to our audience. A problematic trope is not a trope that's too...
I gotta know how you're being directly... Like, clearly, we're gonna have different takes on this because I'm kind of a psychopath. I'm a low-tier psychopath. Okay, I have this many feelings. I do have some feelings, but they're this many feelings. But unless you're literally degrading your audience, I have a hard time understanding this. And I understand also that most writers are also high on the emotional and intuitive response to everything, and I am not that, so we're going to have a very different perspective on this, and no disrespect to anybody who is more emotionally empathetic, but it does read to me as somebody who does not have these emotional responses and this emotional understanding or interpretation of the world. This reads kind of crazy to me. And again, that's not in disrespect. That's just me sharing the perspective I have due to the neurological positions that I'm in. I even have had authors come at me in the comment section of their own Goodreads reviews and say, fuck you. And like, that is straight up abusive to your readers, but I would not necessarily say fiction itself is abusive to the readers. You could present me with cases, but that's going somewhere.
Dangerous or scandalous. It doesn't make the writer cool or edgy. A problematic trope is a plot device that perpetuates harmful stereotypes that are an actual problem in the real world. Basically, you're taking a harmful belief that...
Wait. But that's going to be different for everybody based on your background. So if you say, well, this is a problem in the real world, well, it might not be a problem for you, but it could be a problem for someone else. So this is like a landmine trap that you set yourself into that... Oh, well, I didn't know that that's a thing, and now suddenly you're problematic because you're not empathetic to other people's plights, or now you're marking off, well, that's not really a problem, so I'm not really going to care about that. Because tell me, when was the last time that people really got on top of the trope of priests raping people in the church? That's harmful, is it not? To some people, that would be... To some people, would that not be considered a harmful stereotype? But if you decide, well, I don't really think so because I think we should be talking about this, then okay, so you get to disrespect one person's feelings for your opinion. And that's how any of this goes, which is why I think it's kind of silly. But you're free to like and dislike whatever you want. And that's what I think generally any sort of trope discussion comes down to, is like or dislike whatever you want. But I think trying to use emotional tactics to tell people that they are morally incorrect for their trope enjoyment, because it's not your trope enjoyment, is kind of sketchy at best.
Hurts people, and you're giving it your seal of approval, whether knowingly or not. This is not about coddling your audience.
I give every trope. I should say, I give every trope my seal of approval.
C-section.
I'm sure that someone will come up with something that is like insanely just like, what the frick? But you know, creative liberty, go for it.
5 pages of my book. And it's a romance, but people absorb what they experience.
You know what? I should take that back because I am not a fan of the psycho girlfriend bit that Jenna likes to do with Layla.
Emulate media, and reading is
go
no
for it,
exception.
girl.
So while it's important to be creative and to tell the story that you're passionate about, it's also important to be mindful of the messages that you're conveying to your audience. Because
but that is difficult. Specifically, it is impossible to completely control the message that you're sending to your audience. And I gotta ask Jenna about this specifically because she's got a book that is all about all of the female characters sexually abusing the male characters. That's what Layla and her friends do. They keep touching Toby while he's naked. They don't ask for his consent. They stick their hands between his butt and they make him very uncomfortable while they're fingering his dick. And all of her female characters objectify men in The Savior's Champion. Well, all of the servants, okay? Was that her intended purpose? Is she going to apologize for that? Because that is a toxic trope of just these women that can sexually abuse men all the time, and it's not seen as anything because what, women aren't considered sexual predators towards men? Because that's exactly what was happening. Anyway, you can't fully protect your story or figure out what your story is going to convey to other people, because when you're dealing specifically with art, it leaves some level of interpretation up to the receiver of the art, and that includes them bringing their own experiences and character perspectives and taking on visions of your characters or understandings of your characters that you couldn't necessarily have ever guessed that that's what people would walk away with. Because if she had known that Layla came across as a sexual predator evil woman, would she have published Savior's Sister the same way that she did? Or is that like all on me because I misread it? And like, this is putting the onus on the author to mind read everybody who could possibly ever read your book and every interpretation of it ever. That's impossible.
Audience will absolutely internalize them. Honestly, all the tropes on this list should be
Also, again, I'm just going to become like I'm going to seem like a completely callous psychopath in this, but it is not your responsibility to manage how other people feel, especially when you're delivering your book. This is why I think it is so important to have these conversations, because authors can put so much pressure on other authors to consider literally things that are impossible for them to be able to know before getting stuff out there. For people cannot control the reactions, emotions, or responses of others. You can think that you're even writing the most emotional thing ever that is going to make everyone who reads your book cry, and they won't. Or they'll even think that it is offensive because you can't control the response other people have to your thing. And that is kind of crazy to think that you can.
Easy to avoid, and they shouldn't be at all shocking. But I'm sure there'll be plenty of angry people in the comments, because after all, common sense ain't common. Let me know which...
I would say critique or feedback is not angry, and that's what we're doing here. So just for that. But, I'm sure that I will get my own plenty of negativity from this, but why not? So I'm just going to skip all of her sales pitch. If you want her stuff, it's easy enough to find. So let's go ahead and get into what exactly are these tropes that she thinks that we should get rid of.
Number 1, bury your gays. The burying gays trope is when LGBTQ plus characters are seen as more expendable than straight characters. Overall, queer characters are more likely to die than straight characters in media. Often they're the only characters to die in the story, and quite often it's a direct result of their queerness. Obviously.
So I'm like, well, you can't get me for this number 1 because you have no idea how many gay characters I have. But number 2, if you're looking at Dead End Drive, well, of course, yeah, the only gay character in that book dies, but also 8 out of 12 characters in that book die. Technically, actually, it's more than that because you've got Agatha dies. Oh, I feel like there's somebody else that I'm missing that dies right off the bat that is not actually, like, in the main plot. But there are at least, like, 9 to 10 people that die in that book. You can't get mad at me because one of them was gay. They, like, include all of this variation in there, but also treat your characters a certain way. Again, this is putting arbitrary rules on something that stops people from being able to develop what they want to do, because now they're playing, like, a chemical balance game with how to put everything in order so that it contains all of these elements and doesn't piss people off, instead of just telling the story that they have to tell.
This is problematic because queer people throughout history have been killed for being queer. So perpetuating this system of punishment in this...
I don't know if I should be careful with spoilers. Be careful, this character did not die because he was gay. He died because he died because he couldn't get out of a stereotypical trope. He could have survived. He would have survived if he didn't keep listening to the bitch that didn't care about him.
Is incredibly harmful. Now some people hear this and think, what the fuck? Who am I allowed to kill then? Which seems really weird out of context. Fiction, particularly speculative fiction, often includes copious amounts of murder.
There's so much murder.
Without perpetuating harmful tropes. Say you have a cast of 10 characters.
This hurts my brain so much. Like, I know that there are people that really care about this, but, like, thinking so hard about the minute things that you do, and then going, my writing is so important. My writing of this one character who gets their throat slit in this one chapter is so life-shatteringly important. That just feels egotistical to me, okay?
Of them are straight,
sorry.
And one of them is gay. If you only kill the gay character, that sends a very specific message, don't you think? Even if you were to kill a straight character alongside of them, it doesn't matter because you literally killed off your entire queer representation.
So then why did she make up well, if you only kill the gay character, well, then it feels bad. Well, no, because she says if you kill other characters along with the gay character, it still doesn't matter. So again, you're making up arbitrary rules for people to force things into their book that don't necessarily belong there. And this is also how you end up with, like, an overbloated cast, because you're trying, in order to make everything fit and make sense, to fight against this arbitrary, well, you're a bad person if you do this, so make your cast a certain way so that it's... But it also, this is the problem that Alexa Dunn has gotten herself into with her books, where she makes her cast this specific set of ideological rules for characters, but then you also know who her bad guy is going to be because she can't break this rule. And also half of her cast is going to end up being gay now, but then you also know that your gay guy can't be the bad guy, because then it also turns into this, well, gay guys are often demonized, and that's a harmful trope, so you can't make the gay the bad guy, and so then you know exactly who the evil guy is going to be, because it's not going to be anything that falls into this harmful trope, and your story's not surprising or fun. It's just so exhausting, and it's counterintuitive to creativity. This is so counterintuitive to creativity. Tell me how this is not limiting. When you can't treat people like people, you have to put them in this special condition class that says, well, only in these conditions can you do that, and even then it's not good enough because you still can't do that because it demonizes a history of demonology, and it's... I'll never play by these rules. If you play by these rules, good on you for being able to do that, but I am never going to be able to play by these rules. I just see people as people, not by their categories.
5 of them are queer. If you were to then kill one gay character and one straight character, it sends a completely different message. There are still plenty of gay characters living and thriving, plus you treated your straight cast in the same fashion. Number 2.
Look, you just have to trust me that... Oh no. I'm going to need... Can I get the prognosis on Cain and Abel? So, Cain and Abel. Oh my gosh, I'm so terrible at always getting their names wrong. Abel is a gay man who becomes a serial killer, who targets other gay men. Like, all of his victims are gay, because he picks them up at the bar, and he sleeps with them. He picks them up because he's attracted to them, and he sleeps with them, and he kills them, and then he sleeps with them. And so, if I kill, like, 15 to 17 gay men, but it's also by a gay man, and it is also inspired by real life. Where does this fall in the spectrum? I need to know how much repenting I gotta do in my other stories to make up for this one. Okay.
The character said no, but their eyes said yes.
Look, she obviously doesn't understand that dubious consent is clearly flirting in a lot of situations. Sometimes non-con is straight up flirting in some certain situations, specifically yaoi. If you know, you know. Look, you have to... This is such a popular thing. So many people love dubious consent. It is a kink. It is not just a trope. It is a kink. And no shame on you if you like it. You just... You know what you like if you like it.
But they ultimately enjoy.
I don't care if Jenna might shame you for liking dubious consent. I won't. I got you, fam.
The character told them to stop, but they fell victim to seduction. Dubious consent is not sexy. It just makes the scene gross and uncomfortable.
Or it's low-key flirting. Again, check out the sweet pool here on the channel if you want to see some dubious consent. I might call some of the Tetsuo, like the first Tetsuo scene, like non-con. Nah. Is it straight up non-con? Well, it's not violent. Probably dubious. It's probably more dubious. But you can do it.
If what you're going for, then you nailed it. But if you want to create a romantic saucy scene, then this is absolutely not the way to go. Sexual...
Or it is the way to go for some people. I'm just saying.
Assault is
Jenna. Not everybody, including dubious consent, specifically when it's the kink of dubious consent, is doing it as sexual assault because it's a kink. I feel like it is so crazy to also be talking about kink-specific stuff or fantasy-related stuff, like sexual fantasy-related stuff, in serious manner of speaking. Because imagine that you've got, like, a brothel and this character was hired to pretend to be a dead body because that's what gets the person off. Not preferable, but it's not the same thing because you have this other situation going on. Like, there's a separation between fantasy and reality, and you have to take into consideration the genre and the type of story that's being told, honestly, when you're dealing with this sort of thing. Because I also get it. I have read stories where rape is done terribly, where rape is used for trauma specifically and not for flirting, and those are very different stories. I've also seen characters that did get PTSD from being raped and then still fell in love with their rapist. It depends. But this is a very popular trope, so, like, don't trust her on this one.
Huge problem for people of all
She just don't like it.
The way it's regarded, a lot of sexual assault survivors don't feel comfortable speaking up or going to the police. Writing dubious consent as desirable only further perpetuates this very unhealthy narrative. It's triggering for survivors to read, and it normalizes...
I'm pretty sure that dubious consent or non-con is, like, one of the most popular kinks, especially among women. So, I mean, you do you, but like I said at the beginning of this, I don't like people moralizing their preferences for tropes to make other people feel bad for what they like to consume.
A really fucked up idea of what sex is supposed to be like. Remember, writers, arousal is not consent. Number 3, the token black character, and...
it can be in romance. That's all I'm gonna say.
The black character dies first. I put these two together because they come down to a common denominator. These characters are included so the writer can say, here you go, I did it, I wrote a black character. Where are my diversity points? The token black character is a lone black character among a sea of white folks. They don't have any lines, they don't contribute much to the story.
So does this, so it doesn't count if the character is not in a sea of white folks, or they have more than one line. Like, how many rules do I gotta write down in order to do this?
So it's just to motivate the MC. The black character dies first is another throwaway character that only exists to be the first fatality. In both of these situations, the character only exists
oh, come on, it's funny.
That someone who wasn't white exists in the book.
It's so funny. It's so funny that they use that now when they don't have, when the black guy is like, hey, I ain't going in there because I know I'm gonna die. Like, we know. The being aware of the trope also is hilarious.
That someone has zero agency, and in the second example, that someone is
just bad writing. Honestly,
it's
just bad writing is bad writing, whether it's a trope or not. I think you can get away with doing pretty much any trope as long as it's more or less entertaining. And that's not to say everyone will love what you're doing, but if you're entertaining more often than you're not, you're probably fine.
Dehumanizing. Writers are relegating people of color into these roles because they don't know what else to do with them. If you are shoehorning in a character of color and you don't know how to write them as a multidimensional human being, this is probably a good time for introspection and education. It shouldn't be hard to humanize.
Also, if you're shoehorning in a bunch of male characters and you make them all rapist assholes except for the one that you want to fuck, you might want to start looking into how to actually write men. Jenna.
The character who's literally a human being. Number 4, fridging a woman. To fridge a woman means to kill a female character, usually a wife or a girlfriend, in order to motivate a male character.
Oh my gosh. So we've gone through every single one now. You can only kill white straight males. And maybe you can kill somebody else if you kill enough white straight males to redeem yourself for killing whoever is not a white straight male who is coming. Like, this is going to be a spoiler alert for Bodymore. So Wayland, her best friend, disappears at the beginning of Bodymore, and that is her entire motivation for that entire book. Now, if it had been the other way around, where a female character disappeared and Wayland was motivated to go after the woman, what, is this suddenly toxic because somebody cares about somebody else and that is their motivating factor? This is terrible. It's fighting against human motivation and what's natural to humans and saying don't do it because for some reason it's bad. And also, this was written by somebody that hates men. Like, this trope specifically, I'm pretty sure, like with the Bechdel, was it this or the Bechdel test? One of the two. Doesn't matter. If you don't want to use women as motivations, fine. But it's very normal for men to have women as motivations because the men love women in their lives.
Or advance his hero journey. Now, plenty of characters are killed to advance a plot, but fridging a woman is a wee bit different. The female character is reduced to
explain to me.
Her sole purpose is to die a painful death, so the male character can become a hero. See? Her
That's
death
fine.
is worth it. This
That's literally fine.
It reinforces misogynistic stereotypes that exist in our world today. A woman's
No.
duty is to fuel and motivate men, and ultimately, they're disposable.
No, it just happens. And no, nothing about our society, people are going to disagree with me on this, but our society says that women are more important than men because our society asks men to go and die for women. Our society, for the longest time, specifically has said women and children are more valuable than men. Men stay behind, let the women live because you should die. That is how it is. And it's also intrinsic to male nature to want to protect the things that they love because men are protective. Now, you might be like, that's misogynistic and I hate that, like Alexa Dunn does in her more recent book, where every time a male character wants to be protective of the female character that he adores, she's like, oh, that's misogynistic. But women like it in general. And if you don't like it, you don't have to write it. But I think that it's reductive and it's mean. And it's mean to men and it's mean to women. To say that you can't like this and you can't do this and fighting against men's desires to protect women is just unproductive and unhelpful. If you don't want to write it, fine. Do whatever you want. But treating it like it, again, this is treating it like her desires or her interpretations of tropes is morally superior to anybody who disagrees with her. And this is what I hate about the trope talk.
Mindset that has gotten women abused, subjugated, and murdered for centuries. Perpetuating it in fiction isn't going to help us at all. So how do you avoid this trope? Maybe don't kill a girlfriend or a wife.
Again, I feel like it's kind of egotistical to say, hey, if I kill this woman at the beginning of this story, it's going to perpetuate violence in real life. I am just a fiction author. Look, we can even look at Stephen King's Rage, and it is not motivating people to kill people. Broken families are motivating people to kill people. I think this is putting way too much onus on the authors for things that are not actually the author's faults.
In order to advance a man's plot. That sounds like an obvious solution. If you do have to kill a female character, give her an actual character. If you can't, maybe don't write women at all. Number 5, inspiration.
bruh, some people just have to die at the beginning. Like, you get the hooker at the beginning of CSI Miami. She dies, okay? That's the start of the crime. It's fine.
Inspiration porn refers to a disabled or neurodivergent character who exists to inspire the reader. Wow, look how challenging their existence is. Don't their struggles make you appreciate your life? The problem with inspiration porn is, once again, it's dehumanizing. Disabled people are regular, normal people living regular,
well, yes,
lives.
I will mention.
But my fiance is disabled, and he shits and pisses like everyone else. This may shock you, but I'm neurodivergent, and look at me, doing anything.
Sorry, I was feeling sick for a second there. Yeah, my brain actually stopped working on this. So inspiration porn is very annoying, and specifically trying to make your story feel more special by using characters and highlighting specifically, look at me doing this thing, having this character involved in this. I hate it. I read, oh my gosh, what was that book with the nymphs, where it brought up this one character in there, and it very much broke away from the narrative of the story and the voice of the story to have one of the characters basically straight up describe, oh yeah, this character is autistic, and that's why she does this thing with her fingers. And you would not have really guessed that character was autistic if not for the thing telling you that she's autistic, which then made it feel like a signaling of, look, I'm being inclusive, I'm doing this on purpose, instead of actually making that character real and deep and having that be meaningful. It was just there to be a flag, and that is super annoying. I also think this can go too far with when you're wanting to write a character who is overcoming something, and then people can consider it offensive if you write a character overcoming something. There are different ways. Again, this can just go back to bad writing, because inspiration porn specifically is, yeah, it's annoying. But you know what's also annoying is saying, hey, look at me, I'm special. I specifically avoid, and I know that I'm going to get in trouble for this, because I specifically avoid sharing my personal medical and neurological information, mental or psychological information, because I don't feel like I should have to out myself in what my background is, what my diagnoses are, in order to justify my opinions on things. I don't think I should have to be forced to, be blackmailed into telling people who I am or how I think or what I've been diagnosed with or the difficulties that I have gone through because of it, in order to justify how I think it sucks that people push it forward to say, hey, I am this thing. Look at me, I'm kind of special. Look at me specifically saying that my opinion is worth more than yours because I had this experience. And I know plenty of people will find that offensive, but I also personally find it offensive that other people, one, think that they can talk over me because of their experiences, and two, they're obviously making assumptions about me and my life journey and who I am and what I've gone through, because I don't just openly talk about my identity or my experiences or my diagnoses in order to push my opinion higher up than others. I just want to express whatever it is I have to express and try, and I expect the same from other people. And we're going to have different experiences, and that's fine. And it's also fine if we disagree on the level of importance of that. But we can still disagree and be respectful, and it makes me sick to see this thing where it's, I'm going to delegitimize you by saying that I'm this thing, and then you're then forced to either out yourself or be totally invalidated by this other person who is assuming your experiences because you don't want to disclose that information. I think it's a very dangerous and disgusting practice that has taken a hold in the creative community, and I'm going to leave it there because I know there's going to be disagreement on that.
I feel all warm and fuzzy inside. Look, we're just trying to live our lives. We do not exist to inspire you. We exist to better ourselves. Avoiding this trope, like all the others, is pretty easy
well,
to
do. We do exist just to exist. And so then making it into this thing where it's us versus them and where I have to justify who I am and where I come from in order to write something kind of messes with that.
Multi-dimensional human beings with diverse traits like everyone else. Last time I checked, Cliff wasn't defined by his chain. Number 6, the dead trans character. Are they a sex worker? I have a feling they're a sex worker. I read a lot
I can't help it that it happens a lot, let's be honest.
They die. And 9 times out of 10, they're a sex worker. No shade to sex workers.
Again, just again, another person that you're not allowed to kill. I can't help but noticing.
An entire group of people solely in this light, especially a light that's already unfairly judged, just isn't accurate. Sex work is real work, but we'll save that topic for another day. My point is
that going to be a trope, though?
Comes down to just acknowledging the fact that people are not a monolith.
Excuse me, what if somebody hired a prostitute for DubCon? Are we still going to say that DubCon is a dangerous, toxic trope? Or, like, Where does this line go?
Trans sex worker is problematic because it paints all trans people with a single brush. They're almost always sex workers out of necessity, not by choice, and they die in a horrific fashion.
But are you allowed to write somebody's experiences or not? Are you allowed to write reality or not? Like, if somebody is going to write a story in Chicago, is it okay if they write based on the demographics of Chicago, but based on the stories that come out of Chicago? Is it okay that I wrote a story set in Baltimore and it takes in crime statistics for that thing? I'm not saying that it specifically brings up crime statistics, but it does talk about Bodymore. It does talk about how there's a lot of death there and how there's a lot of crime there. And if you look it up, there's more crime in Baltimore on a yearly average than in most cities in America. And is that a harmful trope, even though it is provably existing? Because what some of this tells me is that you're not allowed to write certain experiences. These tropes are just recognizable patterns that we as people see from life and from statistics and from experiences. And when you do stuff like this, you say, well, you're not allowed to reflect the life that you have lived or the life that you have seen or the experiences you have had through what you're writing. You have to make stuff up and wash things off. And I don't agree with that in writing.
You can represent trans people in your book in another way. Literally any other way. They could be alive, for starters. Maybe
or every way. Every way.
The best friend, the mentor, the girl next door, or the hero. Just a thought. You do you. Number 7. Sexual assault made me stronger. I know you're all thinking about
You can do that.
Poor Sophie Turner was done dirty with those lines. But this is a trend that's been going on for eons, and it's almost always perpetuated by male writers. Male writers.
Bruh.
Stop it.
Bruh. Great face. Bruh. I have seen so many female writers do all of the same things that male writers get reamed for, like using sexual assault to make your main character better, to stronger, whatever what this is, to do trauma porn for the main character, to literally, just to traumatize that main character. The frick is I doing? Objectifying female bodies and describing them in great detail from other female and male perspectives. But men are the only ones that get reamed for this. Again, do whatever you want, but just don't. I'm just kind of sick of the critiquing one side or saying one side of things is only doing it when I read enough to see everybody can suck at writing regardless of their genitalia. That's all I'm going to say.
I critique these stories myself. The femme fatale finally breaks down and shares her story, revealing that she was gang raped in her past, and that's why she—
I will say this is annoying. If you're gonna make a character be raped, make it make sense, make it be worth it, make it actually have emotional impact and be important to the story, and not just throw it in there. But again, this just sounds like bad writing, because you can use this specifically to be strong, and if you're a poor writer, then it won't be strong, and that's what this comes down to.
The badass she is today. Someone please feed these writers to sharks, I beg you.
Oh, and I should say, she says this. This is also one of the more popular tropes as well, because you know how many fictions, especially female favorite fictions, are revenge fiction. I think Spit on Your Grave is literally revenge fiction for somebody that's been raped a bunch of times. Like, it is, revenge fiction is one of the more popular female fantasies, as far as I've seen from the women that I've talked to.
First of all,
not
yes,
my favorite.
Sexual assault is a widespread problem, and it affects a lot of women. But turning it into a phoenix
and
story
men.
is offensive.
Hello, and men. Jenna, your bias is showing. Men also suffer sexual assault.
It's like turning dysentery into a weight loss solution. Yeah, I nearly died, but look at my summer bod. Women can be badass without being violated. Women can be strong, tough, determined, or any other assertive trait without first being demeaned by a man. You don't have to work sexual assault into a backstory. This is not
True.
the only way to toughen up.
True, and don't feel like you have to. But if it works for your story, it works for your story. But also, don't feel like you have to throw a sexual assault in to make your character strong.
The woman. Women are already pretty tough to begin with. Number 8, the mentally ill villain. But Jenna, I can't write a mentally ill villain?
Yes, you can. You absolutely can write a mentally ill villain. You know who you are. Look, but I think what pisses me off more with any of the using of mental illness is that a lot of people feel like they have to label it when they put a mental illness in a book, when really, if you're doing a good job with showing the mental illness, people will pick up on the cues, and then it'll just be there. Again, it goes back to that first book that I mentioned. It's on my channel here because I did a review on it. It has a bunch of nymphs in it and like a blue-green cover. But if you express the character correctly, people will see that somebody is neurodivergent, and then you're not telling people this is what this experience looks like, because you're just showing somebody's life. Maybe this is all just for like self protection reasons up in here, because all I apparently do is write transgressive fiction. Since I have, Creatures Lie Here isn't for a while. That's in the 1950s, set in an asylum. And you have all sorts of mental illness in there. Autism wasn't diagnosable then, but one of the centralized characters who kind of leads the story is autistic. Somebody in there has PTSD from being consistently sexually assaulted. It's a male, by the way, Jenna, and he is so important to showing the main character this world that he did not want to see. Actually, the cannibal was also sexually assaulted. That caused him to dehumanize to the point that he doesn't see himself as human anymore. He sees himself as better, and he eats humans as a way to dominate the human. Kind of in a mental way to get back at the men that raped him as a child. But there are some issues in that book, but I never actually diagnose any of them on the page. And I think this is where a lot of stories at least run into trouble with me, is they diagnose on the page and then they feel like they have to show you exactly what that diagnosis looks like, instead of just letting characters exist. If you read Dead End Drive, you'll see some expressions of some neurodivergence in there. If you read Bleed More, Body More, you'll see expressions of PTSD in that book, especially in book 2. But I never say that with any of it. So if you don't pick that up, that's fine and you'll still have a good time. But I think that there's this responsibility people put on themselves that is not necessarily, that doesn't need to be there.
I don't know, can you? 1 in 7 people in the world have a diagnosed mental illness, which doesn't even touch on the people that have undiagnosed mental illnesses. The point is, it's extremely common, which means it's very likely that some of your characters have mental illnesses as well.
Which means don't question. If somebody's got an opinion, don't question whether they're neurodivergent or have mental illness, because maybe they're undiagnosed. You don't know. Boom. Look, if half of your cast is neurodivergent, then it's okay to make your villain mentally ill.
Our only mentally ill character is the villain. You can kind of sort of see how that's a problem. There's a huge stigma against mental illness. It prevents people from being accepted by society and from seeking and receiving help.
Funny enough that she says this, because people that often push this also discriminate against those that do have neurodivergency, because they're kind of really out there. Look at what happened recently with Elon Musk being laughed at by Twitter staff for being autistic. That happens a lot. People will say, I believe or support neurodivergence, and then they run into people that have like a bipolar and they can't deal with what that looks like. And I think that society has kind of romanticized mental illness. I'm not saying it's all just this outlandish thing, but I don't think society is doing a very good job right now of recognizing what severe mental illness looks like, and I think that's been a problem for a while. And I don't want to get further deep into that right now, since this is just a silly little trope video.
I think people who are struggling to receive medical attention is...
But making your bad guy have issues is not demonizing them. I wish we would stop putting all this extra weight on just creating characters in a book to tell a story.
Now, like most of the points on this list, there is a balance. If you have a buttload of evildoers in your novel, adding one mentally ill villain probably isn't a big deal. But that's assuming you also have mentally ill heroes, which honestly shouldn't be hard to do. Anxiety, depression, PTSD, OCD. There are so many mental illnesses.
See, this is where I'm saying I think it's romanticized and watered it down, because I'm not saying any of those are not mental illnesses. If you get to the point where it is obsessive compulsive disorder and you do have that disorder that is disruptive to your life. But I think people forget that in order to be diagnosed with a disorder, it has to cause immense distress and or disruption to regular living function. That is what the DSM says. And so it's not just like, oh, I like to turn the light on and off 3 times before I leave. It is distressing and disruptive to a normal life situation. So just having regular social anxiety or shyness is not the same as having a severe mental disorder. And so I think we end up where, you get to the place where people don't recognize that Richard Chase was out of his mind and he was struggling so much. And then they say, well, you can't write a character that does this because you don't want to demonize. But they're looking at these softest core versions of emotional distress. And I'm not trying to what's the word that I want? I'm not trying to devalue anybody's experiences here, but I think we're looking at some very different things and then and then making judgments and putting weight on things that there need not be weight to.
That are extremely common and should be really easy to input into your cast of characters. I'm sure you can think of some really popular heroes who fit those mental illness descriptions. Number 9, the romanticized predator. This kind of goes hand in hand with dubious consent.
He take what he wants. Look, that is just popular. People love it. People love the dude that just take what he wants. That is like the most one of the most popular male alpha tropes. It happens all the time. That's all I'm going to say on this.
Usually the predator is male, and his predatory behavior is being labeled as dominant, strong,
alpha,
and desirable.
alpha.
First of all, naturally dominant people do not need to force others to obey them.
Which is true, but also
forcing someone
kink.
to be intimate with you, first of all, isn't intimacy, and second of all, it's an act to try and claim power that you don't naturally have. Second,
but
this is once again painting extremely toxic behavior as positive, which has a profoundly negative impact on the real world. I've lost count of the number of people who told me that they ended up in abusive relationships because their only examples of romance were the toxic books that they were reading.
Stop reading toxic romances for your expressions. I should say, stop looking at romance novels for what a healthy relationship looks like. It's a fantasy. That is what it is.
Desirable will inevitably result in real life damage. And last but certainly not least, number 10, better off dead. This is a trope when someone is neurodivergent or disabled and the reader is led to believe that they are better off dead. Their life is not worth living because it's
But they can think that. What happens, so I'm not even going to finish this video because we already got what the last trope is, so I'm just going to comment on this and go because this is long enough. But what happens if you have a character that is in the situation where, one, they feel so much distress that they feel better off dead, or the people around them feel like they're better off dead? Like I was just saying with diagnosis, is the actual diagnosis in the DSM requires that you be in immense, significant emotional distress and or your normal functioning, whether it is work, whether it is relationships, whether it is sexual, are disrupted and you cannot function as a normal person would. If you think of like sexual addiction, somebody with sexual addiction cannot stop themselves. It is a compulsion that they have to keep getting that hit, and it gets them in dangerous situations. And some people make that mistake for the relapsing, and they feel like they'd be better off dead because they can't stop themselves. This is delegitimizing entire points of view, and then saying that people who actually feel like this don't deserve to have their points of view expressed in writing. And maybe you don't like it, but you don't have to read it. This is my problem entirely. Well, half of the problem I have with these sorts of rules is you're delegitimizing other people's experiences for your own. And I'm not saying you have to like them. I'm not saying you have to write them, but saying, well, mine is morally correct and yours shouldn't exist because I don't like it. And then saying your expressions are the correct ones and the only ones that should be shown because otherwise it's dangerous. But then this person is over here saying, well, nobody knows the experiences that I have, and so I feel even worse, like I'm alone and there's nobody else to empathize with me. You're not being empathetic when you say don't do this. You're locking people's expressions out and people's chances to see either experiences they'd never see, which is this level of distress, because some people never feel this level of distress, and seeing it in books is the only place that they'll get to have that experience and see that impact and be able to make that change, because now they can see what that looks like in real life. Oh my gosh, it's so, I can't agree with this kind of censorship and this sort of demonizing of expressions. You do you. At the end of the day, you do you. You like what you like. But this is why I wanted to talk on this, because I don't feel like there's ever enough discussion on these things, and it's always one person telling other people not to do something while delegitimizing everybody else's experiences if they don't line up with their own. Obviously, I'm going to have different experiences, and I'm sure there will be different, obviously, I have different experiences and different opinions than people who will have likely watched this video, possibly don't like my opinions, probably don't like my opinions because I'm not very careful in the way I speak. But it's not up to... But that's all that I can say, is I will forever defend your ability as a writer, your right as a writer, to express yourself and the world you see and the experiences you have in whatever way you see fit. That is always what I will be. And then I will critique whether I think the story is written well or not. It will never be on these political boundaries. I just want to see you put together the best story that you can that tells the story of people or life or humans that you want to tell. And then I will tell you why that did or did not work for me in the creative space without these things. I personally don't really focus on tropes ever when I'm reading. I don't think I notice them almost ever. I think I had somebody recently even ask me, like, when I'm going, well, what are my favorite tropes or what tropes were in my books? I don't even think of those things because I don't notice them. I don't think I even notice when there are similarities between different books most of the time, because when I'm reading a book, I'm just there having this experience with this author and just trying to focus on that. And at the end, then I try to decipher what it is that I just went through. But I get that that's also not how other people consume books. One of the things that makes it interesting is we all have our own interactions with all of these books and with these authors, and we form different relationships with the authors and characters and stories and experiences. And that's also why it's important to be able to consume different stories with different tropes and write about these different things. There's always going to be an audience out there for whatever it is you do, even if you don't do it well. Every book that's been read by at least a handful of people has been enjoyed by at least one. And I believe that. So those are my thoughts and my response to Jenna's 10 worst problematic tropes. Yeah, write whatever you want. That's my thing. And then just write it well. I think that's my biggest takeaway always, is write it well. And anybody can write poorly. So just take pride in your craft and get it done. With all that said, thank you so much for watching. Have a great weekend and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross. Is he in trouble? We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Why? Did you do that? To the left. Plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?